The alarm on my wrist tore me out of sleep at 2 in the morning, and I knew before I even opened my eyes that something outside the fence line was screaming. My name is Daniel Foss, and I run maintenance on Outpost 6, a trading post pressed against the edge of Dragon Kingdom territory. It is a lonely job. Most nights the only sound is wind against metal walls and the low hum of the generator. That night was different. That night something small and desperate was crying out in the dark, and the sound cut straight through the storm shutters like a blade. I grabbed a flashlight and my jacket and went out into the wind before I even thought about whether it was safe. That was my first mistake, according to everyone who explained the rules to me later. You do not go outside at night near dragon territory. You do not investigate strange sounds. You definitely do not walk toward anything that might belong to them. But I did not know any of that yet. Not really. Not in my bones. I only knew that something was suffering, and I could not stand still and listen to it. The sound led me past the fuel drums, past the broken satellite dish nobody had bothered to fix, all the way to the drainage ditch at the edge of the compound. And there, half buried in mud and shivering under the storm, was a creature I had only seen in briefing photographs. It was a dragon, a baby one, barely the size of a large dog, with wings folded wrong against its body and scales the color of wet slate. Its eyes were open, and they found mine immediately, and it made that sound again, thin and broken, somewhere between a screech and a whimper. One of its front legs was twisted underneath it. It could not stand. I should have called it in. I should have radioed the border patrol and let trained people handle a creature that belonged to a species with warships and laws I did not understand. Instead, I knelt down in the mud, and the baby dragon flinched away from me, and then it looked at my hands, empty and open, and it stopped flinching. I do not know why I trusted my instincts over every warning sign posted around that outpost. Maybe it was the way it looked at me like it had given up on anyone coming. Maybe I just could not walk away. I picked it up, wrapped it in my jacket, and carried it inside. Under the light I could see it clearly for the first time. It was starving. Its ribs showed through thin scales, and its twisted leg was not broken, just strained, dislocated from cold and exhaustion. It had probably been out there for days. I did not have dragon food. Nobody stocks that on a human trading post. So I did the only thing I could think of. I opened my own rations, warmed a can of protein stew on the stove, and offered it a spoonful, expecting it to refuse, or worse. It ate like it had never seen food in its life. I fed it slowly, small amounts so it would not make itself sick, and between bites I talked to it the way you talk to a frightened animal, low and steady, telling it nothing important, just sound to fill the space. Its trembling eased. Its twisted leg I wrapped carefully with a strip of cloth and a splint made from a ruler, the same way I would have handled a hurt bird back home. It let me. It watched my hands the whole time, like it was memorizing them. By the third hour, it had stopped shaking completely. By the fourth, it had curled up against my leg near the stove, full and warm for what might have been the first time in days, and it made a small sound in its throat that was nothing like the screaming from before. It was almost a purr. I sat there on the floor of my quarters with a baby dragon asleep against my leg, and for a while, I let myself believe that was the whole story. A stray animal, rescued and fed, nothing more complicated than that. I even smiled about it, thinking I would have a strange story to tell the next supply pilot who came through. I did not know yet that dragons do not abandon their young by accident. I did not know that every hatchling belongs to a bloodline, tracked and guarded from the moment it breaks its shell. I definitely did not know that the storm that night had knocked out a border beacon 50 miles east, and that an entire royal search party had been grounded, blind, searching on foot through mud and wind for something they were terrified they would find dead. I found all of that out at dawn, when the sky over Outpost 6 turned dark with wings. I heard them before I saw them, a sound like distant thunder that did not stop rolling. I stepped outside, still holding the sleeping hatchling, and the light of the rising sun caught on scales. Dozens of them, then hundreds, filling the sky above the fence line. Warships followed behind the flying shapes, sleek and silent, settling onto the open ground outside the compound like a wall closing in. My hands went cold. I thought about every rule I had broken that night, every warning I had ignored, and I understood, all at once, that I might have made a mistake large enough to end my life. The dragons landed in formation, and from their center walked one that towered over the rest, scales a deep burning red, eyes sharp as cut glass. Every other dragon lowered their heads as she passed. I did not need a briefing to understand that this was someone who commanded absolute authority. She stopped in front of me, close enough that I could feel heat rolling off her body, and her eyes went straight to the small shape wrapped in my jacket. For one terrible second, nobody moved. Then the hatchling stirred, lifted its head, and let out a happy little cry the moment it saw her. The change in that towering dragon happened faster than I could follow. Her whole body sagged with something that looked exactly like relief, raw and enormous, the kind you only see in someone who believed they had already lost what they were looking for. She made a sound low in her throat, something between a growl and a sob, and every dragon behind her dropped fully to the ground, wings spread flat against the dirt. I stood there frozen, still holding the hatchling, with no idea what any of it meant. She spoke, and the words came out rough, forced through a mouth not built for human language, but I understood every one of them. You fed him. It was not a question. I nodded anyway, because I did not trust my voice. You touched his wound. You gave him warmth. You gave him food from your own hands. Again I nodded, and this time I found words. I told her I heard him crying in the storm. I told her I could not leave a creature suffering like that, dragon or not. I told her I did not know who he belonged to, and I was sorry if I had done something wrong. She lowered her enormous head until her eyes were level with mine, and for a moment, I thought I had misunderstood everything, that this gentleness was only the calm before punishment. Instead, she said the words that changed the rest of my life. Among my people, there is no debt heavier than the one owed to whoever saves a hatchling's life. He is the last of a line that fought a war to protect this border. If he had died in that storm, an entire bloodline would have ended with him. You did not know that. You did not need to know it. You helped him because he was hungry and hurt, and that is the only reason that has ever mattered to us. Behind her, every dragon on the ground let out a sound together, a deep resonant hum that shook the dirt under my boots. I later learned it was a sound reserved only for moments of great honor, rarely heard by anyone outside their own kind. She told me the hatchling's name was Tauren, heir to a line the Dragon Kingdom had guarded for 300 years. She told me that by their law, whoever saved a life like his became bound to that life forever, not as an owner, not as a servant, but as kin. She used a word that did not translate cleanly into anything I knew, something between guardian and family, spoken with a weight that made the warships behind her feel smaller than they had a moment before. I looked down at Tauren, who was trying very hard to climb up my arm despite his splinted leg, completely unaware that he had just made me part of dragon history before breakfast. I told her I only wanted to help. I told her I was not looking for honors or titles, that I had simply done what felt right in the middle of the night. She said that was exactly why it mattered so much. Among her people, greatness was proven through strength and conquest. She said humans, it seemed, proved it through something else entirely, something quieter, something they did not even seem to notice they were doing. By the time the sun was fully up, word had already begun spreading across Dragon Kingdom space, carried by the same ships that had flown out that morning ready for war, and found instead a tired human sitting on the floor with a sleeping hatchling curled against his leg. I did not become a warrior or a hero in the way their stories usually told it. I became something stranger, A single point of trust between two very different worlds, built not on treaties or trade agreements, but on one small act nobody had planned, done in the dark, for no reason, except that something was hungry and hurting and needed help. Torin healed within weeks, his legs strong again, his wings finally steady enough to fly. He still comes back to Outpost 6 sometimes, landing outside my door like he did that very first morning, and every single time, the ground trembles just a little under the weight of dragons who remember exactly why he is still alive. I never meant to change anything. I only fed a hungry baby who was crying in the storm. But sometimes that is all it takes to shift the fate of an entire kingdom, and I am still, to this day, the only human who knows what it feels like to have that kingdom kneel at his front door.